You're listening to the Horror Spot Podcast.
Sheriff, wait! You gotta listen.
I'm tired of listening to you, kid.
I gotta show you Jason's grave.
I've seen it. Come on, get up. Get up!
Please, Sheriff. You'll see we dug it up.
Well, he must have got chilly in the night and pulled the dirt back over.
That's not right. Somebody covered it over. I gotta see it.
Freeze it, psycho.
Now see what you've done. You made my deputy draw his revolver. He's been dying to try his mail-order laser scope.
Wherever the red dot goes, you bang.
What's the problem, Sheriff?
No problem, Martin. Just a vagrant kid. We got it under control.
Did you cover up Jason's grave? What? What are you talking about?
Don't concern yourself, Martin. This kid needs treatment.
Jason's not in his grave. How's this? Dig it up! You gotta dig it up! You gotta dig it up!
Dig him up? Does he think I'm a farthead?
Hello, horror fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Horror Spot Podcast. I am your co-host, Blake.
And I'm Nick, and I think this is the first and last sixth episode. I'm not 100% on the number, but I'm pretty sure it's the sixth episode.
It is the sixth episode, which is kind of ironic because today we are going to be covering one of my favorite movies, Friday the 13th, Part 6.
The golden child of the Friday the 13th movies.
Yes, indeed. The movie that literally brought this franchise back from the dead. No pun intended. Or maybe all the puns.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not as far as the money goes, but it's definitely the fan favorite for sure.
Oh, certainly story-wise, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
After the fiasco of Part 5, where Jason wasn't even in the movie, yeah, totally.
You know what? For me as a kid, I didn't really mind that, but I can see where the problem comes with that, the treachery. It's the season of the witch treachery.
It is treacherous, for sure. But yeah, Part 6 definitely makes up for the shortcomings of Part 5 in spades. So what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is we got a little bit of a surprise in the latter half of the show. We sat down with writer and director of Friday the 13th, Part 6, Tom McLoughlin, just to sit down, chat, talk about the movies. I get a little bit weepy with him because, God, I've wanted to talk to this guy forever. So yeah, total fanboy moment. But yeah, so Friday 6, one of my favorite movies of all time, definitely in my top 5 horror movies. What we're going to be talking about tonight is we're going to be going over the synopsis. We're going to be talking about cast and crew of this movie and what makes Friday 6 so great in the series.
I'd say basically with it being like the opposite of every Friday the 13th before it is what makes it amazing.
Yeah, I agree. So this movie really, it has a heart and it has a soul. Right? I mean, where the previous 5 Fridays before this were... so, like, the first Friday the 13th was obviously, you know, a ripoff of Halloween, admittedly, by Sean Cunningham. It was a ripoff. You know, it kind of spawned this franchise. Number 4, the final chapter, was supposed to be the last one, but then we get this kind of, like, redheaded stepchild. No offense to any redheads out there. My girlfriend's a redhead. She'd probably laugh at me for saying that, though. We get this redheaded stepchild of a sequel called Friday the 13th: A New Beginning, and it's okay. It's the easiest out of the
Let's
Friday
point out
movies.
the problems right away. First of all, big one, no Jason. Okay, the ending was open-ended. All right, and it didn't even connect to 6, which was fixed thankfully because the ending was pretty weird. No character development at all. Only reoccurring character was Tommy, played by a different actor. Like, it goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah, I mean, we could do an entire episode about Friday 5 and why it's bad, but we're not going to do that tonight. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, and why it is so great. Like I said, this movie has a heart and a soul. It has developed characters. It adds on to the mythos of the character of Jason Voorhees. And this is the first movie where quote unquote zombie Jason makes his debut.
Yeah.
So those of you that grew up in the 80s, late 80s, I was born in 1982, so late 80s, I kind of remember TV spots for the later Paramount movies, particularly Part 7, where Jason was already a zombie. being scared. So I always thought he was a zombie, but it was this movie, Friday the 13th Part 6, where Jason became the unstoppable undead killer that we all know and love today.
It's not subtle at all. He wakes up, boom, punch through the heart, pulls his heart out of his body. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. So he obviously becomes way more powerful. So just a little bit of backstory for nobody who has seen this movie yet. Let me go ahead and read the synopsis so we can get that out of the way here.
Let's do that.
So the synopsis of Friday the 13th Part 6 goes like this. So Tommy Jarvis, who is, aside from Jason, is the only reoccurring character in the series. He's the one that originally killed Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th Part 4. And yes, Jason Voorhees did in fact die.
Yeah, he killed the shit out of him.
Yeah, definitely. So Tommy Jarvis, what happens is he goes to the graveyard where Jason Voorhees is buried. Tommy has been institutionalized in and out, since his adolescence, and he feels that by cremating the corpse of Jason Voorhees, he can put his hallucinations of Jason to an end, kind of clear up his mental instability by knowing for sure that Jason is in fact dead. And as Tommy says, he's going to see Jason in hell tonight. But what happens is when Tommy and his friend Alan Hawes, played by the guy who plays Horshack in Welcome Back, Kotter.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. They dig him up, right? They open up the casket. There's Jason. He's rotting. He's gross. And what happens is Tommy, he kind of has these flashbacks of his original encounter when he was a kid. And he kind of goes a little ape shit. He pulls this fence post off the fence, a rickety fence, starts stabbing Jason with it over and over and over and over. And then what happens is when Tommy goes to grab the gasoline and matches that he used to intend to cremate Jason's body, a lightning bolt strikes the pole, reviving Jason a la Frankenstein style, and carnage ensues. The newly revivified killer seeks his revenge. He climbs out of the grave, reclaims his hockey mask, and then basically cuts his way back to Camp Crystal Lake, which is now changed. It's named Camp Forest Green, which we'll get to here in a moment. But that's basically the synopsis of Friday the 13th. Jason is revived. Tommy has to figure out a way to stop him, and boy, does he ever.
See, that's one of the things I really like about this one more than the others is it has meat on its bones in a different way, not a serious way, but it doesn't take itself so serious. And it's so fast-paced. All this wacky shit happened in, the first 10 minutes?
Yeah, just all this crazy stuff. Even before you see the opening credits of the movie, right? We get the movie opens on this dark, ominous sky. It opens on the lake. It's foggy. It's eerie. It's very Tom McLoughlin. He has this love of gothic horror, and the movie opens up in a very gothic horror-esque kind of way. We see Tommy and Hawes get to the graveyard. Jason's revived, punches a hole right through Hawes, which you've never seen Jason do before. Right?
And you know what? He was asking for it. Hit him with a shovel. All he did was get his attention. Give me a break.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to Jason, that was kind of a mosquito bite, right? He turns around, he's like, WTF, dude?
He's like, all right, well, now you're going to get it.
Exactly. And he does. Punches Hawes' heart right out, which is something we've never seen Jason do before. He has become much more powerful in this movie because he is now undead and he's been revived via the power of electricity. So he has all this massive strength. We've seen feats of strength from Jason before, throwing people through windows, crushing skulls with his bare hands, but nothing ever like this has happened before.
No, and you know what? There's some parts in the movie where I can't remember his name, but that misogynist paintball guy, with the machete, he's like, I should have stayed in the kitchen where she belonged. When he grabs him and throws him, he takes his arm off with him, and Jason just kind of looks at it like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I believe that character's name is Roy.
Yeah, it was Roy. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a throwback to Part 5. The killer, of course, being Roy.
Yeah, but yeah, you could tell that Jason was the new strength was so different for him, and he didn't expect it to go down like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just ripping that guy's arm off was a total surprise. Who knew that was gonna? It's like a kid playing with really flimsy toys at this point.
Yeah.
One really cool thing about this movie that I love from the first moment I saw it to this day was the opening sequence for Friday the 13th. So all this crazy shit happens even before the title credits. And when it does happen, right, Jason puts on his mask, the camera pans in and a couple quick cuts into Jason's eye, and then you see this like ghostly image of Jason walk onto the screen, look at you, and slash with a machete, and all this bright red blood gushes out. But it's like a James Bond-esque opening, right?
Oh,
Where you
it
see
is
James Bond,
definitely, definitely.
yeah, where you see Bond walk up in shadow only, shoot the screen, the blood comes down. Total homage to the James Bond movies.
It's so great too. Like it's obviously not subtle at all, and you know what it is, but you don't feel embarrassed for it when it happens.
Oh yeah, no, it gives me goosebumps every time because it's just such an awesome thing to see. And it was just so different from any other opening from the previous 5 Fridays. And then once we get into it, it's very clear that Jason is much more powerful. And then, you could just the mania that Tommy Jarvis has now, he's like racked with guilt about what he's just done, but he also has purpose because he needs to, figure out a way to destroy Jason. Tom Matthews, who plays Tommy Jarvis in this one, hits it spot on. I don't think there was anybody else who could have played this role the way he did.
Yeah. It was. I mean, I don't know how Corey Feldman would have played it if he was older, or cast. I don't even know how old he was during this movie because he was in the beginning, right? Or was that 5 he was in the beginning of?
Yeah, that was 5 in the beginning. That was Corey Feldman was filming The Goonies at the same time that Friday 5 was being filmed.
Yeah.
So they only had him like for, a few hours, right? But they couldn't have got Feldman to do this because he wasn't the right age. Because you got to remember, these movies only came out like 2 years apart. So, I mean, Corey Feldman would have been a teenager, as where, Tommy Jarvis is a full-grown adult in this movie.
Well, it had to have been a year apart because Part 6 came out in '86.
Yeah, correct. These came out like almost once a year.
Yeah.
It seems like maybe a year or two between. But yeah, I want to say that. Let's see. So Friday 1 came out in 1980, 82. Or I'm sorry, 81 saw Part 3, 82 Part 3. Yeah, 81 was Part 2, 82 Part 3, 84. Did Part 4 come out in 84? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then 85 was Part 5, 85, 86 was Part 6. So
Yep.
yeah, it would have only been 2 years.
Let's put this into perspective, okay? By the time Halloween 4 came out, there were only 4 Halloweens, and by that time there were 8 Friday the 13th movies?
7. Yeah, 1988 was a huge year for horror. You had Friday 7, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Texas Chainsaw 2. There's a very famous picture, you could look it up on the internet, of all the actors getting together for a picture.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it was the big 4. Yeah.
And you know what? I'll defend Texas Chainsaw 2 till the end of my days. Okay, that movie is fucking great.
I love Texas Chainsaw 2. Absolutely. Without Texas Chainsaw 2, I don't think Bill Moseley would be where he is today.
Oh no.
Right? Because
such an iconic character.
Absolutely.
I mean, the next generation can go fuck itself, but the second one I'll defend until the end of my days. All right, well, let's get back to Friday the 13th here. We kind of wandered off a little.
Kind of got sidetracked. We tend to do that a lot, but both Nick and I just love horror movies, and we could talk about them all day long.
Yeah, it'll wander into God knows what.
Well, knowing you will eventually get into Black Christmas. Some way, somehow. But getting back to Friday 6, so there was a lot of firsts in this movie. So obviously it upped the power of Jason. It had really good fleshed out characters, I feel. Part 4, directed by Joseph Zito, had really good fleshed out characters as well. Part 5 kind of went back to the superficial, characters. But with Part 6, each of these characters had a connection with each other, right? We have the main group of kids who go back to what is now Camp Forest Green, right? They changed the name because they didn't want to be reminded of what Jason
Except
did there.
Everyone knows better anyway, so it doesn't even matter.
Right, it's still Crystal Lake to him, as Tommy Jarvis says. You got this group of friends, and you could really tell that they're close. Like the way that these characters are written and acted, you could tell that there is flesh on the bones for them. Even the adult characters in this movie, like Sheriff Garris, who's played by David Kagan, and his deputy, there's just something about all of these characters. The caretaker in this movie is
such a
fantastic.
small role, but it's like he put effort into writing his line.
Absolutely. And the great thing, this movie breaks the fourth wall with that character.
So many
This
times.
character looks right at the screen right after covering up Jason's grave again, not knowing that Hawes is in there, looks right at the screen and says, "Some folks got a strange idea in
Yeah.
entertainment." You're right. I mean, it's freaking perfect.
Well, I
Um,
like how aware it is. Not to the extent of Scream or Behind the Mask, but just like you said with Sheriff Garris, like he was nicknamed. He was named after Mick Garris, and like, what was
Yep.
it? Cunningham Drive, the Carpenters. Like there were reference after reference after reference.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Um, Another thing about this movie that is so great, and another first for the Friday series, is it actually has kids
Yeah.
at the camp.
Which, you know
Right?
what? When I watched it for the first time, I was worried the whole time. And some
Oh
of the
yeah.
scary
Oh
shots
yeah.
in that movie are when he's stalking that girl. I don't remember what her name is, but
Nancy, which could be a nod
oh,
to
right.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Well, it's
Right?
also Tom McLaughlin's wife's name, so
That is true. Yes, Nancy McLoughlin, who plays Lisbeth, one of the
Yep.
adult counselors, who gets the fence post in the head.
Yeah. So yeah, what I was saying was some of the scary shots of that movie are when he's just peering in at her through the window with, I think it was Sissy that was with her, like just looking in, not caring if either one looks. Like he's looking at that little girl. And you know what? I think if he had more time, he definitely would have done something to her.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, maybe I don't know. I
Well,
mean,
if he had no plans on that, then what was he doing that whole time? Like,
I like to think that the scene between Jason and Nancy, where he comes into the cabin, right? There's that real great shot of where the door opens. It's just on his feet. The
and
leaves
the leaves,
blow
yeah.
in, right? And then he walks over. He sees that Nancy's awake and kind of like leans down and looks at her. I can't help but wonder if that's a scene where Jason is trying to remember his childhood. Not to get too meta on
Yeah, yeah.
this. A lot of people think that, when Jason drowned in the lake that he died and then he came back and was this weird like undead man beast,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't buy. I think he
No, I'm stuck on the theory that he was alive the whole time and he's been living out there.
yeah, same. But I think, this is the first time aside from Tommy Jarvis, he's seen a child in a very long time. So maybe he was trying to, I don't know, again, I don't want to get too meta on this, but maybe think back to better days, perhaps. I
Yeah,
don't
but
know.
he kept fucking with her.
He did. He kept scaring her.
Like
right?
when
Which
the
is a great part.
deputy showed up, he killed him right in front of her. Like it was just, well, I don't know if it was right in front of her. She ran off, but still, like he was following her. Obviously, that's how he found the deputy.
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. She runs out. Deputy Pappas, I believe his name is. Runs out. Jason comes out, crushes his skull. Great kill, by the way.
That damn
But yeah,
MPAA.
Yeah, right. Totally gutted this movie. But I mean, going back to the kids, yeah. I mean, like I remember the first time I saw this movie, I was a little kid, and I was so afraid that Jason was going to come in here and basically do the thing that I was afraid of and kill all these little kids.
Oh yeah.
And it even the kids in this movie are great, right? The little girl Nancy, she's fantastic, and the two boys, that have
Dead
this
meat.
dialogue. Yeah, told you, dude, dead meat. What were you going to be?
Yeah. That was great.
Thing. That makes me laugh every time, and I've seen this movie hundreds of times just because the delivery is so dry and just so matter of fact by
Yeah.
that kid.
He doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah, he was like convinced, that he was gonna die right then
It's
and
like, it's
there.
over, man. The kid thing was definitely like, it was so weird for me when I was young because there's no other horror movie that put kids in danger except for maybe Halloween 2 with the babies in the hospital, but like,
Child's Play.
oh yeah, never mind. Never forget what I just said.
Duh.
Yeah, because he definitely tried to murder that kid.
Oh yeah, or at least beat him up and steal his body.
Well,
But
I mean,
still,
by the end of the movie, he was trying to kill Andy for sure.
that's true. That is true.
Anyway,
But yeah, and then like another thing that is so great about this movie is all the big stunt work that we see. There's a scene where the character Court has snuck away, to be with his girlfriend. They're in this like RV and they're driving back, and Jason has snuck into the RV, killed the girlfriend, and one of the greatest kills in this movie, smashes her head, through the side of the RV, and it like leaves an impression of her face in there. But he kills this the character Court, and then it crashes this RV, and there's this big crash scene, and then Jason busts out of this RV and then stands on top, triumphantly on
That
top
is
of
my
this RV.
favorite shot of all time.
Oh, it's great. It's great. For the longest time, I had that as my wallpaper on my laptop, just because it's a great scene.
You know, it was a
My
great kill for such an annoying person because Court was just awful.
Oh,
And
you didn't like Court?
no, I didn't like him at all. But
Aw, man.
the way by the way, Alice Cooper, great job on Teenage Frankenstein and Man Behind the Mask.
Oh yeah.
But
Totally.
when Teenage Frankenstein's playing and he gets stabbed in the head and like it stops and echoes and then it's so quiet and then the RV flips, it was like it's just so effective in like every way.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. I mean, like I said, everybody in this movie is great. What I'd like to do is talk about C.J. Graham as Jason.
Mm.
So, C.J. Graham, I think, is easy in my top 3 Jasons.
Oh yeah, he was great.
Sure.
You know, for someone that had no experience in that kind of character at all, he absolutely killed it.
Absolutely, and actually, he wasn't the first guy to be hired as Jason for this. Don't quote me, but I think they got Michael Nomad, who was the stunt coordinator on this movie, to play Jason. And then when the Daily,
I think his name was Dan.
uh,
No. I think his name was Dan something.
oh, okay, maybe.
I mean, either
guy.
way, whoever
I
it
heard-
is, unfortunately, the studio told him he was too fat.
Yeah, right. They filmed that scene, the triple decapitation scene, the famous scene where Jason jumps out of the tree, kills those 3 paintballers. And
Damn,
admittedly, yeah,
MPAA
Jason was
number 2.
right. And admittedly, yeah, Jason was a little bit chubby in that scene. So when the dailies came back, and this is what I've heard, just watching interviews with Tom McLoughlin, who we spoke with, which you're going to hear a little bit later, came back, and producers were like, "Yeah, he's not the right body type for Jason." So they found this guy, C.J. Graham, who's an ex-Marine, totally built like the fucking Terminator.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Scary human being.
Absolutely. He fits the bill of the character Jason Voorhees to a T, right? He's tall, he's menacing, he's fucking stacked. Easily in my top 3. Him, Kane Hodder, and Ted White are my top 3 Jasons.
Well, you see, you say that the perfect body type, but up to until this point, that wasn't even the body type, really.
That's true. Yeah,
he kind of
kinda
set the standard. Yeah.
That is true. Yeah, because you're right. Because I mean, like Jason had gone through a couple different, body types. He was, average man-sized in part 2. He was tall and lanky in part 3. More stocky in part 4, and then of course,
yeah.
part
See, those
5
are
wasn't even Jason.
those are some of the best parts about all these franchises, except for Nightmare on Elm Street, obviously, where the killer starts out a regular guy. I mean, Jason was never a regular guy, but I think in some ways I prefer older Jason, but that's only because it gets really ridiculous after 6. Like 6 was done well. It wasn't too over the top. It wasn't part 8. That was just punching heads off of bodies. What are you doing?
That was a little bit over the top, albeit cool, right? And it's fun to replicate that kill in Friday the 13th, the game. By the way, if nobody's played it, you should, because it's really fun. But yeah, after part 6, it gets a little weird. Part 7, though, is really, really cool. Of course, that's one of my favorite Fridays. But yeah, I mean, just going back to everything about this movie, such a good movie. And going back to C.J. Graham, he kind of set the template for, the undead Jason, just in body type, the way he moves, things like that. And then, of course, you get Kane Hodder, who takes over the role from here up until Ken Kirzinger in Freddy vs. Jason. But yeah, such a good movie. So I feel like I'm talking like way too much here. We're not really talking about the movie so much. You want to go over cast?
Yeah, let's do that. So first and foremost, obviously, we got Tommy, best Tommy. I think we already went over that though. We got Jennifer Cook as Megan. Is that right?
Yep, Megan Garris. Yeah, the final girl of this movie. Just kind of funny because I always think Tommy is the final boy, right? But we got the final girl here. Yeah, Jennifer Cook plays Megan. She's the sheriff's daughter in this movie. Fantastic character. Again, not helpless by any means.
No.
Whatsoever.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, after Jennifer Cook, we have another showstopper of the movie, uh, Sheriff Garris, played by David Kagan, who gets one of the best kills in the entire series done to him. Again, kind of taken out by the MPAA,
Oh, it
but
was
still another fantastic character.
oh, that was the most heartbreaking one. It was so good.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You know, to anybody who's never seen this movie, basically, the Sheriff Garris character, after he realizes that Jason is in fact back and Tommy's not batshit insane, um, goes toe to toe with him, blasts him with the shotgun a couple times, shoots him in the head, but runs out of bullets. And then eventually, Jason, at the finale of the movie, is going after Megan. Sheriff Garris goes after Jason, attacks him with a rock, beating his head. He's on top of Jason. Jason picks him up and then literally bends him in half backwards. Like the scene in Freddy versus Jason
Trent,
where that
yeah.
yeah, where that guy gets killed in the bed where Jason bends him backwards. Part 6 did that first.
Yeah.
And the uncut version of this I've only heard about, I've never seen it, but there were these like takes where Jason is bending Sheriff Garris backwards and you just hear his spine breaking, like crack,
Yeah,
crack,
yeah,
crack,
yeah.
crack, crack. And it's supposed to be super brutal, but of course in the movie, I think it's only like 2 quick cuts where Jason bends him over backwards. You hear the snap, and then you just kind of see him twitching, bent in half.
Yeah, I remember watching Crystal Lake Chronicle. That's what it's called, right?
We got
Crystal Lake Memories. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember watching that and Tom McLoughlin just saying like they were taking up frame by frame by frame by frame by frame, and it just got to the point where it was like 2 frames and then a shot of his face. Fun fact, David Kagan was Jennifer Cook's acting coach. So you know what? That's pretty cool because before I knew that, I felt like they had really good chemistry and like they were definitely related.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. David Kagan, by the way, plays Sheriff Garris. Last I heard, he has an acting school down in Hollywood, so he is like a real life acting coach,
Yeah.
as well as an actor. So, good time. Next up, we'll just kind of lump all these guys together. The friends. We got Paula, Sissy, and Court, who, along with Megan, are the new camp counselors for Camp Forest Green, aka Camp Crystal Lake. Again, like I was saying earlier in the episode, all of these characters have chemistry with each other, and there's a lot of scenes with Renee Jones and Carrie Noonan, who play Sissy and Paula, respectively, that are just really good. I mean, they're just well written and believable. Like, you believe that there are these 2 teenage girls super bored at this camp, playing cards or whatever. Paula is worried about her sister, who is played by Nancy McLoughlin, Tom McLoughlin, the director's wife, who gets dispatched earlier in the movie because she's supposed to be one of the head counselors, and she never shows up because she gets killed way before she gets to the camp. So just these scenes between all these actors are something that you've never really seen before to this extent in a Friday movie. It to me, Friday 6 aspires to be more than just a slasher, and I think it really pulls it off in spades.
Well, yeah, I think they worked a lot harder on the characters because like with past Friday the 13th, obviously it was like just everyone at the camp was trying to get fucked up and get into trouble. Like every single person that has ever been there. But these ones, they're just hanging out, taking care of the kids. They're actually doing their jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, they're not here on vacation. They're not here, getting a camp ready. The camp's already ready. All they have to do is just be there, for however long it was going to be, the weekend, the week, whatever, and do their job. And then unfortunately, Jason comes along and kills them all.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, I mean, aside from the friends, we got, your favorite character, Court, played by Tom Fridley.
John Travolta's nephew. Weird.
Yep. Yeah, I know, right? Sure is. And then we got Darcy DeMoss, who plays Nikki, which is Court's girlfriend, the chick who got her head crushed a bit in the RV. Great scene. She has really big hair in this movie. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, it is 1986, and that was the fashion. Let's see. Who do we have next? We have Vincent Gostafaro, who plays Sheriff Garris's deputy, Rick. Has the famous line, "Wherever the red dot goes,
Ya
you
bang."
bang."
God, what a shit for brains, this guy.
Oh yeah. Oh, he's so greasy in this movie, but it's so
Ugh.
great.
Yeah, he acts like the toughest guy on the planet, but like they took advantage of him so easily.
Oh, for sure, right? Or like the scene. So eventually, Tommy Jarvis gets jailed by the
Yeah, yeah.
sheriff, right? Because the sheriff thinks that Tommy is acting as Jason and doing all these kills. There's this scene where Megan is plotting to get Tommy out, and the deputy is left alone with these two, and they
I'll
kind of
get it for you,
bamboozle him.
babe.
Right? Yeah. Megan is drawing on this drawing pad, and Tommy takes it away from her, and she's like throwing this little hissy fit. And yeah, Rick Cologne says that line, "Don't worry, I'll get it for you, babe." Just the way he says
He's
it,
such
it's just
a
like, "Ugh,
just
God,
an
you're
asshole.
gross."
Ugh.
And then we got Darren and Elizabeth, played by Elizabeth, like I said, was Nancy McLoughlin, who is Tom McLaughlin's wife, the director, and future Ghost star Tony Goldwyn, who plays Darren.
Yep.
Yep. These guys aren't in the movie for very long, but Nancy does have a lot of memorable lines in this movie. When they're driving along on this muddy path, they see Jason in the middle of the road, almost guarding the road, right? Like, I dare you to get past me, kind of deal.
I just want to talk about how stupid Darren is. What a total idiot. What are you gonna do with that little pea shooter, buddy? I don't feel like I'd take my chances with the mud.
Right? Yeah, and I mean they start to, but
Well,
then
he's like,
they
we'll never
were-
make it through. Fuck that. See you later. I'm running away. Are you kidding?
Yeah, peace out. I would.
You're in the
rather,
woods, and there's a man in front of you, gigantic man, wearing a mask and has a weapon in hand. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I mean these characters were doomed anyway. Even if they ran out of their car and tried to hoof it, Jason would have still gone after him.
Yeah, but I mean, they don't know that.
Exactly. And Darren didn't know that gun would have literally no effect.
Yeah, I
on
mean,
Jason either.
it was a really small gun. I don't know if it would have had any effect on a regular person.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't even know what kind of gun that was.
It was
I
a
know
22.
It was a pistol.
It was
a
a 22, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 22s are like, you shoot squirrels with those things. You couldn't, especially with Jason. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's just going to be like a mosquito bite to him. But it's in the scene where Nancy McLoughlin, after seeing Darren get killed in a very cool way, he gets speared and then tossed over Jason.
Yeah.
She eventually flails out of the car into this mud pit, and Jason kills her with a spear through the head, but not before she offers Jason like a whole wad of cash and credit cards. And in interviews with Tom McLoughlin I've seen, it's this scene in particular because they do kind of this like tracking shot of this American Express car
Yeah.
floating away on the water, and he said that inevitably in every showing that he went to, somebody would scream out, "Never leave home
That's
without it."
hilarious.
Oh yeah, it's great, and it's just that genius writing by Tom McLoughlin that kind of sets these moments up, right?
See, and that just proves to you that he had the audience in mind when he was writing the movie.
Absolutely, yes. This movie is as much a black comedy as it is a horror slasher movie. There are moments of tongue-in-cheek humor in this movie that just make you just laugh, right? I mean, this movie, I think, has it all. It's got laughter, it's got scares, chills,
Yeah.
the whole shebang, and some really cool kills.
The pacing is fantastic, too. There's never not something happening.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's never a dull moment in this movie whatsoever. Whether it's the electrifying, no pun intended. Okay, yeah, maybe a pun intended. Electrifying ending.
Strike one.
Strike one. Womp womp. The RV crash, which is kind of towards the middle of the movie. Just these great scenes all the way till the end. When Tommy Jarvis has trapped Jason at the bottom of the lake via a boulder and chain necklace, right? Because he thinks that returning Jason to the lake will, destroy him forever. But we all know that doesn't happen.
And you know what? Let's talk about that a bit, because in a little bit here, I want to talk about like our personal favorite kills. But it's the most half-assed plan ever. He's just gonna leave him there. What if he got out?
Right?
Like, he's clearly not human anymore.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, what if the chains rested and just broke on their own naturally?
Yeah,
Megan's
Megan's like, oh hell no, pops on that boat motor and fucks his neck up.
Right?
I'm like,
Fucks up
there
his
we
face,
go.
fucks up-
Jesus.
Yep, fucks up his face, fucks up his mask, which you see the wounds of in part 7, which is great.
Hideous.
Super hideous. Yes. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if Tommy had really thought out his plan. He just knew that he had to stop Jason and this was the thing that made sense to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's gonna return him to his original resting place, and the curse of Jason Voorhees will be done, which we all know is not true.
Yeah.
But it made sense at the time.
Yeah, because some certain people just wouldn't let the franchise rest in peace.
Definitely. Looking at you, Frank Mancuso Jr.
Yeah, but another thing I liked about this movie, we were talking about it being kind of light and not as trying to be Halloween in a certain way. Henry Manfredini, or Harry? Is it Harry or Henry?
Harry.
Yeah, Harry Manfredini. It's my favorite soundtrack out of any of the movies.
Oh yeah, for
'Cause
sure.
It's got that.
Yeah,
It's got like a cherry on top. It's the classic Friday the 13th soundtrack, but it's got that extra.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean the first, you know, 4 movies all kind of had that same soundtrack kind of deal. That
dung,
same.
dung, dung.
Yeah, exactly. But Friday 6, man, it takes the soundtrack to, you know, a whole nother level. And I think you're right. When it comes to Friday score, the original Harry Manfredini score, this one really is the cherry on top. You know, from the opening scene, you get this like violin, you know, just staccato sound. Not really staccato, but
Yeah.
just the score that is great, and it really works. And you don't get the typical Friday dan, dan, dan
Mm-hmm.
thing that was just overdone, especially in part 5. Um, but yeah,
Well, I think the reason it worked so much for me in this one is because it was a whole new Jason, and like the music changed completely.
oh yeah, for sure, absolutely. New Jason, new score, you know, new score to settle. Well, so aside from the cast, what I'd like to do is kind of talk about the budget on this movie. So let me go ahead and get that pulled up real quick. Oh yeah, that's another thing, man, is that so yeah, there were songs used in past Friday movies, but this one had Alice Cooper
Alice
songs.
fucking
And
Cooper, dude.
Alice fucking Cooper. Yeah, so the other day when we were talking to Tom McLoughlin before he called, I was actually listening to The Man Behind the Mask to like get myself pumped up.
That is a great goddamn song.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Oh man, okay, I can't find the budget for this, but I can tell you that the total domestic gross for this movie was over 20 million. It was, or not over, I'm sorry, just shy under. It was 19 million 472 $1,057. Which at the time was huge. You know, I mean, it was a big release and a big movie. Number 5 was a stinker. This one brought it back for sure.
I mean, I disagree with it being a stinker, but you know.
Well, I mean, part 5 has its place. You know, it has
was
its
just
fans.
a big fat lie.
Right?
That's what it was. That's the problem, because people went there and they dressed him up as Jason. Like, make him look different a little. I know they put the blue instead of the red, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah, the chevrons on the mask. I mean, they did that to differentiate it.
That's not enough.
No, it's really not. You know, I mean, it's not like the original mask was destroyed, albeit, you know, how could Roy get the original mask? He couldn't. But still, you know, I mean, they could have at least tried to make it seem a little bit more like the real McCoy
Yeah.
instead of just an imposter. Overall, Friday 6 is definitely in my top 10 horror movies of all time. I would even say it's in my top 5 because it's literally just that good. I mean, you think of a Friday the 13th movie, you think of slasher movie, you think of tits, you think of gore, you think of, you know, all sorts of foul language. There is not a tit in this movie, by the way.
Oh yeah, there isn't, huh?
There is not. But there's definitely lots of blood and gore in tasteful ways. I would say if you can call a slasher movie tasteful, this movie has kills that are just really cool.
I mean, it's the best kills in Friday the 13th are in this movie.
You know, a lot of people say that their favorite Jason kill is the sleeping bag kill from part 6. This movie contains my favorite Friday kill, which is the triple decapitation. It's just so cool and just so original. You've never seen that before in these movies, and it's just great.
Damn MPAA. Cut it in half.
Yeah, they did.
Man, you know, I'm glad they didn't brutally murder this movie like they did 7, because it would have been.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of the raw footage from part 7. I think through Crystal Lake Memories or maybe another like behind the scene where the director of that, John Carl Buechler, had gotten some of the raw daily footage, particularly where Jason crushes that guy's head. It's brutal, and like the original uncut scenes for the sleeping bag kills are brutal, but they're supposed to be brutal.
Slasher movies are visual. That's like the main thing. Obviously, it's a movie too, so that's the main thing. But you can't cut those. It's like really important.
Exactly, right? It's like we talked about with Scream, the scene where there's moving blood, running down Stu's hand. The MPAA cut that out. It's like, how stupid is that?
It doesn't make any sense. And they let movies like Hostel by with nothing, but then it's a movie like this that they utterly screw over.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would point to a good I guess argument for the MPAA being biased against horror movies. You look at any like war movies, for example, like Saving Private Ryan or Pearl Harbor, right? That have these just horrendous kills, guys
guts
with their,
in hand.
Guts in hand, blown in half, shit like that. And they show it because it's visceral and it's, historical and whatever. I call bullshit. If they can show shit like that in top rated, top billed movies, with Tom Hanks or whoever, they can show shit like that in horror movies.
Well, I think times are definitely changing now. Horror movies back in the 80s put a bad taste in people in the business's mouth. So yeah, I think definitely these days, for example, with Halloween, super gory. Like the times when it was gory. There was no getting around it.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think with the success now, because they're just blowing the roof off of the box office, like they're gonna let them get away with it now for sure.
And the 80s were the 80s, right? It was the time of the satanic panic, and just all this moral majority Reagan bullshit. So yeah, horror definitely took a hit back then, just because you get all these soccer moms clutching their pearls, not wanting their kids to be exposed to this shit. Obviously I feel very strong about this.
Clutching their pearls.
Yes, bunch of pearl clutchers. Yeah, man, so was there anything else you wanted to talk about Friday 6?
Well, I never said my favorite kill.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
You
Go ahead.
son of a bitch.
God damn.
My favorite kill, it's a toss-up because I like the sheriff one. I think I would have loved it a lot more if it was the extended one, obviously, but I'm gonna have to go with the sissy head twist for sure.
Oh yes, for sure.
I love. There's no games in between. He grabbed her and did it. Boom, done.
And virtually bloodless.
Yeah, and it was so like unexpected because of how quickly it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
The zoom in on her eyes, like the whole it was so fluid. It was edited like perfectly. It looks so great.
Oh yeah, the quick cut where like her eyes roll back in her head as Jason is like twisting her head around. Yeah, that's great. Again, signature Tom McLoughlin shot. He's really good at these quick cuts that just really punch home the point of whatever it is that's supposed to be happening. All right. So I could talk forever about this movie, but we have an interview to have our fans listen to. So without further ado, everybody, here is our interview with writer and director Tom McLoughlin of Friday the 13th, Part 6.
All right, guys, we are back, but this time we are back with the one and only Tom McLoughlin, writer and director of the very movie we're talking about tonight. So before we go into any questions about the film, Tom, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, some film influences you had or people influences you had growing up?
Absolutely. First off, I want to thank you guys for having me on. It's always fun to talk about this film, even though it's 32, 33 years later.
It's timeless film.
It's just bizarre. Never thought that was going to be the case when we were making things back in the 80s. We figured it was, going to play a couple of weekends and, then disappear into the vaults.
Yeah, of course.
But so I'm very honored and very humbled by the fact that it keeps going and every generation seems to discover it. In terms of my influences, well, a lot of them are pretty apparent in the movie. Huge Universal horror fan. Obviously, Frankenstein looms very large in my legend. He's 200 years now of Frankenstein we've had, which is pretty incredible since Mary Shelley created him, and it was still still influencing us, horror filmmakers, and also just that gothic style of the Universal horror movies, like Dracula and Wolfman and Mummy and, of course, Frankenstein. So that had influence on me. Then screwball comedies from the 30s and 40s had a lot to do with the kind of dialogue and the kind of use of wisecracks and sort of made up words for things that come up along the way. I did both One Dark Night and this one kind of in that style. And I guess Date with an Angel too. I had that too. That had a huge influence on me of that way of coming up with, a new kind of a word for something. And then the pace of that too, in those dialogue scenes, was very, very influential. And then the rest of it is like, God, Martin Scorsese had a huge influence on my work. Of course, Coppola, most of the Italian filmmakers. Now it's the Korean filmmakers, horror filmmakers, and the Mexican filmmakers. They're coming up with all kinds of stuff that has sort of been influenced by American films, but then they put a different twist on it, and somehow, it's all fresh again. So I tend to go back and, look at either the older films for influences or some of the newer independent films, particularly the horror films. And, always looking for that person with a new vision that you can go, that's really cool.
Sure.
Yeah, Korea is absolutely killing it. I can't believe the kind of movies they're pushing out over there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so well executed, that Train to Busan.
Train to Busan, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, a friggin' killer.
It was great.
Just intense and doesn't let up.
You have
and
The Host. Have you seen The Host?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
all great movies.
Old Boy was probably the first one.
Oh, yeah.
That really said, wait a minute, hold on, what's going on there?
Yeah, Old Boy is great. Trying not to have a fanboy moment here, to be honest with you. Before I get into it, Tom, I just want to thank you so much for agreeing to be on here. The things that you've done, in Hollywood, especially with Friday and The Game, have influenced me as a writer and a content creator so much. So I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being on our show today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I very, very much appreciate that. Thank you. And, I know the feeling because I have people out there that I feel exactly the same way. And, the day I can finally, shake Martin Scorsese's hand will be, wonderful.
That would be it for me.
Yeah.
But a lot of those guys, that had those influence, like James Whale and things from Frankenstein, are of course long gone. But,
Sure.
It is exciting when you meet somebody and say, it's like you influenced me. And now that I'm teaching directing and filmmaking and stuff, I'm constantly saying to the students, don't be afraid to steal. I mean, we all do it. It's the thing. It's the old saying that artists steal and hacks borrow. And I said, if you do a sequence and I go, I loved how Kubrick that is, you shouldn't go, oh no, that's me. No, that's not really. I did. No, embrace it. Embrace the master. That's what all the great painters did. That's what all the great sculptors did. All the great composers. You always have to go and be influenced by something first, and then you're going to make it your own if you keep going.
Sure.
Your own personal taste and your own personal life will influence it. So, I love, going out and being very open about, who gave me this idea or where that came from, because it's not always going to be exactly the same as the persons that influenced it.
Sure, absolutely. So what I'd like to do, Tom, is kind of talk a little bit about Friday 6 and how that came about. I think anybody who's a fan of the franchise has probably watched, special features interviews with you and kind of, things like that, and heard you talk about it a little bit. How did it come about, you getting that gig? Was it something that, like, Frank Mancuso Jr. reached out, or how did that come about?
Well, basically, the backstory and, bits and pieces of this I've told, obviously, over the years on the commentaries and things. But yeah, basically what happened is, I I was making or starting to make films in an era when the slasher film was at its height. And, with the success of Halloween, everybody wanted to make a movie with, a neighborhood, a house, forest, girls, knife, or some other weapon, and somebody with a mask or something to put over their head. So, it's that same idea that it's a faceless killer that you could put on anything you want in terms of, oh yeah, that's like my dad, or that's like the way I feel about this teacher just tearing me up, or whatever psychological issues you have, you could put it onto the maskless killer. The masked killer. So when I was out kind of pushing my films, I wanted, or my scripts, I wanted to really do more of a gothic horror movie, which One Dark Night, my first one, was. And it took a long time to get that going. And I could have had a few different deals had I done, more of a slasher movie. But I kind of avoided it because everybody was doing it. And so my film eventually got into the hands of Frank Mancuso at Paramount. And they were kind of in a panic because Part 5 did not please the fans. They did not like the idea that they did a switch on him and that wasn't Jason. And so normally they always did these movies like about 2 years apart, and now they're going to do a year apart because they wanted to make sure they got their audience back. And Frank looked at my film and said, this guy might be interesting to come in and do a take on this just because of what I had in my film of One Dark Night. So we sat down and talked, and I said, well, if I'm going to do this, it's Part 6. I've got to have a sense of humor about it. And he goes, what do you mean, like make fun of Jason? I go, no. He's still going to be, a killer, unstoppable, all that. But I want the characters to be likable and fun. And sort of like when somebody gets killed, it's like, oh, I like them, and it makes, to me, the kills are even more intense if you care about them, as opposed to somebody that's just a whining, awful character and you're happy to see them get killed. I wanted to go that other route. Plus, I wanted to put children in it, which was a first, to do that. And things like, a car chase, underwater fight, all these different aspects that were very new and still had to, keep the budget, which in those days was very low, $3 million. Now it's like, that's a generous budget for a lot of the low budget horror movies. But then it was like, if you're going to do a studio picture and have all the bells and whistles of that, that was pretty much, what you had to bring it in at. So, he let me kind of, go off and just, figure out some way to bring Jason back. And so that's when, as I said, I borrowed from Frankenstein, or stole from Frankenstein, and thought, I just got to make it more that that has a little more story, and that, Jason was happy to be down there. He didn't have to be tortured and killing people. And Tommy goes and screws up, and instead of just seeing him, he ends up bringing him back to life. So Jason had an agenda, find this guy. And of course, Tommy had an agenda. You got to let people know Jason's back and we got to stop him. So that sort of drove, the story. And then I could hang whatever killings, moments of comedy, stuff like with the kids, what were you going to be when you grew up?
Yeah.
So just so it would have a whole sense of humor about it. And of course, the James Bond thing that I put at the beginning, I really wanted to tell people, this is going to be fun. This isn't going to be just another Friday.
Sure.
So I'm very, very lucky to have, pretty much total control. Frank was very generous and trusting. And so, I think the only thing that changed is I had 13 kills. And after we showed it to an audience, and they were so noisy, so into it, such a party atmosphere, that Frank, in his expertise said, you know what, I think we need 3 more kills. And I go, really? How can we afford that? I thought I went over budget. He goes, no, you came way under. I did? Yeah. Okay, so we're going, figure out 3 other things that we can do. So killed the caretaker and then added those 2 lovers out in the park, to kill. And then we made the sissy, head twist much more graphic, which ended up, so much of that got cut down in the MPAA screenings. But, we just kind of beefed up some of that, and then had to deal with, 9 times being shown to the censors, and, to get it cut down. But that's kind of, the kind of whole backstory, and then sort of where we've film ended up being. And a lot of those pieces of those kill sequences and things, you know, no one knows where they disappeared to. So, you know, a lot of that stuff is gone, unfortunately.
Gone on the cutting room floor, as they say.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. And that was a time, too, where they were really out to get us. By the same weird twist is when I did One Dark Night, I had a lot of, you know, what I considered gory stuff with pus and maggots and, you know, corpses and pressing up against girls' faces and all this. And I thought, you know, at least we would get, you know, an R just by the intensity of all that. But they ended up giving us a PG. And I was like, what? And it's like, no, we appreciate the fact that you didn't do all this blood and, you know, stabbings and all that, you know. And I was like, I don't want a PG. You know? But,
I want an R, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, you know, that was the cool thing to have, is, you know, and get in to see an R-rated movie. But the irony out of that is that grandmas and parents took their kids to go see this PG movie, and it scared the shit out of them. So I've had a lot of, you know, people over the years say, you know, I saw that movie and I was 8 years old, and, you know, I couldn't sleep for a week. But then I ended up becoming a filmmaker, so thank you. You know, so
Perfect.
It did reach an audience that wasn't intended, but it certainly stuck with them.
So I just wanted to ask, I've always kind of wondered, how intimidating was it going into such a huge franchise with the backlash of Jason not being in the movie prior to yours?
It was intimidating. It was me going, you know, that the fans could hate this, and I really didn't know all the way up to the time that we opened that you know, in August of was, I guess, 86. I thought we would have a backlash of, you know, it's like, you can't have funny and Jason, or you can't make a horror movie and funny. You know, there wasn't too many of them at that time. So it was sort of new territory. And then the whole thing about, you know, I changed Jason into basically a zombie, unstoppable, unkillable. You know, he's going to be there forever. I didn't think of him as a zombie as such, you know, because that I always look at as, you know, like George Romero. I mean, that's a walking zombie. Jason is like, I don't know, part Terminator and part, you know, Reanimator. And I mean, it's like a whole, to me, a mashup of a couple of different things. But it became sort of known as the years gone by that, you know, was it, you know, prior to the Jason zombie Jason, or was it, you know, the pre-zombie Jason?
Right.
So as I said, I didn't know what the reaction was going to be. So the first thing that was shocking was that we got good reviews, which never happened before. And that was purely, again, the comedy. You know, they said, how can you hate a movie where a character looks into the, you know, into the lens and says, some folks have a strange idea of entertainment. And, you know, things like that just made the critics sort of back off and say, all right, well, it was a fun and entertaining thing, but I don't necessarily like the fact that we're just watching people get killed for 90 minutes. But the fans embraced it, but we didn't get as many at the beginning when the thing first, you know, showed, because there was a lot of people that were hesitant that they weren't going to get Jason in this movie, as much as the publicity basically says, you know, Jason lives. So, you know, as the years have gone on, you know, the word is sort of built and people find themselves revisiting the movie. And a lot of people have, you know, used that as the first movie they showed to people who don't really want to see a horror movie, but it's like, this one I think you'll like. And which has also kind of worked in its favor. But things I had no concept that was going to happen. You know, I just wanted to go in and try to make, you know, the most fun, scary, funny, hopefully dramatic, you know, movie I could make, and hope that it worked out, you know, for the people that love the franchise, and hopefully people who maybe wouldn't normally go see a slasher movie and saw it go, yeah, I actually enjoyed it. So that was all I was really after.
So in addition to Friday 6, you've also worked on the Friday the 13th game, doing the Pamela tapes.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? Were you approached by, I think it was Gun Media to do this? Yeah. Cool. Do you play the game at all?
I don't, you know, I'm sad to admit this, especially on a podcast, that I'm not a game player, and part of that because I came, late. I mean, games back in my day were those, those little Pong things that, that never seemed like much fun. And then I remember Tron was the first one that I saw, that was, like an arcade. This is obviously you have them at home. And so it never like juiced me to want to do it. But then when I go and I watch these things and see some of the stuff, it's like, holy shit, this stuff's amazing, incredible, and I'm just, I guess, too long in the tooth now to kind of pull myself into that generation and try to compete or get even close. So the game was like, when they were showing me stuff, I was going, this is super cool. I mean, I can't believe what you guys are doing and what you're getting away with in terms of the the kills in there. Kane Hodder was really talk about kicking ass, and he did just amazingly intense stuff. So when they contacted me for wanting to be involved, having me involved in it, and they had obviously Sean Cunningham and all these great Friday alumni, I said, like, in what capacity, and they said, well, mainly we want you to write additional dialogue, and we're thinking about having these sort of Easter egg type things, that you would find along the way, and they would give, a backstory for Pamela. And I can't remember if it was my idea or their idea, to be honest. I'll say it's their idea just to cover myself here. But the idea that, the day that Jason drowned, that Pamela was in talking to the police. And out of those conversations, we get, the fact that she's going to be on her way out mentally as a result of this thing. And also, I added some backstory with Jason's father. And I wanted to kind of go against what everybody was saying was, Jason's father's is this Elias, looked like guy had worked on, construction or whatever. My vision of Jason's father was a far more strange, scary, much more in almost like a Svengali type of character. Not hypnotist, but that kind of weird, person that you see if you see the Camp Crystal Lake Memories. There's we did the storyboards, and that was a little closer to the way I was seeing his father. And that Pamela basically was raped by this guy while she was married to Elias. So part of the reason he beat her and treated Jason like shit is because it wasn't really his kid. So he didn't really care. So I wanted to kind of introduce that idea into the mythology of Jason, and just say that that's part of the reason that he has these abilities that are kind of above and beyond what a normal person, would have. Even before he was zombieized, he still, take quite a few bullets and stand up, or, I kept saying there's got to be something in his past, and it wasn't Pamela, that made him this invincible, evil force.
Sure. Yeah. And, it's funny you mentioned Elias Voorhees, because having, seen those storyboards and, having read, I think it was an early draft of 6 where the ending is still where Elias shows up at Jason's headstone or grave.
Yeah.
Like in my mind. Yeah, it's in the book. Yes. Thank you. I've always kind of pictured Elias Voorhees as almost kind of like a Rasputin-like character, just really looming, kind of evil-looking kind of deal,
Yeah, and I mean, I just felt like, his spawn would be something that would be so, I wouldn't say a demon, but has those qualities in there that are just, somehow beyond human strength and unstoppable. And once you get something in your head, you're just going to keep going and nothing's going to get in your way, which is sort of like what Jason represents, is that unstoppable force that doesn't, really have a face. It's just what scares you. So that fit a little more into, at least my thinking. What they're going to do with all this as the years go by, who knows? I mean, I certainly have, my version of what a sequel would be. And, and there's obviously a bunch of other things that seem like they're coming down the pike. And of course, the fans are making their own now, because they're so hungry, to get Jason back up on the screen again. So it's kind of cool. I mean, you take something away from people and they go, all right, we'll make one ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
With Friday the 13th being such a huge franchise, is that something you always had your eye on, or did it just kind of come and land in front of you?
It pretty much landed in front of me because it wasn't where I was going. I was literally going from One Dark Night to Date with an Angel. I wanted to kind of go from a gothic horror movie to a romantic fantasy, kind of in the kind of classic old school. If you're a good person, like a Frank Capra movie, if you're a good person, something good can happen to you, but in case something absolutely fantasy occurs. And I also wrote it at a time when, I was hoping to find a gorgeous girl, to be involved with. So I wrote this part for an angel in hopes that in the casting I would find the girl that I would be with. But it took so long to get the movie made. I was already married with a child on the way before got the movie made. But so yeah, I wasn't looking even to do another horror movie. I read a lot of scripts. Kept trying to find something, but then this came out. This offer came kind of out of the blue to my agent, and I said, "Gee, I don't know. I mean, I haven't even seen any of them other than the first one, which I thought was good, but I was sort of rebelling against all the the slasher kind of movies because they were just so." There's so many of them. I mean, so many that you didn't even necessarily see in the theaters. They just, ended up getting made and are sitting on a shelf someplace. But the scripts were going around and people were coming up with money, to do it and get a group of dentists together and say, you see how much money Halloween made? Yeah, well, we can do that. Come on. So, when it came to me, I really had to kind of take ownership of it and say, like, if I'm going to do this, I want to really be involved with it, emotionally and creatively, challenged by doing something with it that I felt would be different. So, at that point was when I went to a screening room in Paramount and sat there and watched part 1 all the way through to part 5, in one sitting. And so I got a sense of where things went, where things I thought went wrong, where things had some great elements that we could, refer back to, the stories, all the different things that were sort of part of the legend, and try to, put it together and kind of jump past part 5, kind of go from 4 to Tommy obviously went into an institution, and then kind of pick up, at that point. So there wasn't anybody killing, dressed up like Jason, or if they were, I didn't make any reference to it in my film.
Gotcha. So speaking of Tommy, Tom Matthews played the grown-up Tommy Jarvis in your film. When you were writing that part for Tommy, did you have a vision of who you would like to be in that role, or was it just kind of open to the casting directors and said, "Hey, I think this guy will be a good fit," or how did that work out for you?
Well, I kind of knew the way Frank Mancuso was thinking, which was, he felt that John Shepherd was going to, reprise the role of Tommy, and also knowing Frank, there was going to be a blonde lead girl, final girl, because that's always kind of like the MO with these things. So
Right.
I sort of wrote with that idea in mind of a kind of a, John Shepherd look, but tried to give him, a lot more intensity and wise guy humor. And I was very, very fortunate that Tom came in, and I just loved what he did with it. And the same thing with Jennifer Cook. She just was, a spitfire of a girl. And the two of them just throwing jabs back and forth at each other really caught that spirit of those wisecracking, Cary Grant, Barbara Stanwyck type movies from the 40s, which is what I was, trying to get to. And, kind of bringing that style to, a new audience. And I just wanted them to have, a rapport that was, fun to listen to. They cared about each other, but they also weren't, below calling each other an idiot. That they're doing something really stupid. I don't know what the hell you think you're doing. So, again, it's having that sense of being hopefully smarter about what you're in for, as opposed to, let's just go out there and we'll get him. It's like, with what? I don't know. We'll figure it out. I mean, there had to be a game plan. I needed to have Tommy come up with something that was kind of in the supernatural realm of putting a dead body back where it belongs, or in this case, an undead body back where it belongs. So that also gave him a mission, what he ultimately had to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But Tom was great. I mean, we're still good friends all these years later. It's in fact, all the cast, when we have these, every so often I'll have these reunions, and it's like we get together and it's like we all went to high school together or something. I mean, it's just instant rapport and, such amount of love and gratitude that the movie has been so successful, and that, we all can keep, coming together, year after year, with
Sure.
these different conventions.
Yeah, I've kind of often wondered, about things like that, because like personally, I'm all about the backstory. Like I dig into the lore of these franchises, and that's what really gets my engines going. And I've kind of wondered, after the movies, are said and done, if the cast keeps in contact with each other, or if the directors, writers kind of keep in contact with each other, even so many years later. So that's really kind of cool to hear that you guys all kind of stay in touch.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I mean, I've got a couple projects that Darcy DeMoss, who played Nikki, she called me and said, "Hey, let's see if we can do something together." And it's something like she would be producing. I would, be writing and directing. And same thing with CJ Graham. He's always calling me up, and, and he's still his boss. Boss, I got some ideas here. Maybe something you might be interested in doing. So it's like we still take care of each other, and if there's somebody that needs a certain type, I'll say, you remember the actor that played Sheriff Garris? He'd be perfect for this. Or Vinny, who played the deputy. It's like we all kind of still are part of this, appreciation club of one another. And the shoot was actually fun. I mean, out of the 42 films that I've done, this has been the one that somebody said, what was the most fun? It was like, well, this one was, because we were out there like, renegades, shooting under the title Aladdin Sane, so no one knew it was a Friday the 13th. And, just kind of, up all night, every night, shooting this thing. And it was a great time.
So, Tom, in addition to doing, obviously Friday and One Dark Night, movies like that, you've also created a couple of TV shows, She-Wolf of London and They Came from Outer Space.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So working in television, how is it? I would imagine it's kind of a different experience than working on a feature film.
Yeah, it's very limiting in terms of obviously the scope. And in those days, too, it was, the budgets were super low. The way that those two shows actually came about was that they Universal contacted Mick Garris, and, and he said, oh, this would be something, I'd love to do with Tom McLoughlin. We did a couple amazing stories together, and, we've been, really good friends since, God, I guess it must have been 79 or so since we've been friends. But, so we went into the Universal and they said, okay, we've got, a shitload of all these titles of old movies and stuff. And we've got this Universal network that we're trying to create. What's here that Universal has done that you guys might be interested in doing? And of course, both of us looked at that list and went, American Werewolf in London, and both knowing John Landis, we figured, well, this would be great. We could do comedy, do horror, we both decided. But turns out when they started, we went and got John's blessing on the thing, and then we went, okay, what do we need to do? And then Universal found out that Polygram actually had the rights to it and not Universal. So that fell apart. So I went back to the list and saw She-Wolf of London. And I said, how about that? I mean, that could be cool, female monster, haven't seen that. And then came up with this concept of having a professor that's an expert in that. And he's trying to find a cure for the woman that he loves, who's a werewolf, and it takes him into all these supernatural different myths and legends and monsters and stuff. And then, It Came from Outer Space was another one of those titles, and came up with this crazy notion of, two alien guys. And I saw these two comic actors who worked together that had this great, Jim Carrey kind of rapport back and forth, and kind of tailored it to them. And basically they, driving around having these crazy adventures. So, they came from outer space. and we had orders for 20 shows for both of them. And so we kind of got into it, and there were so many things going on in my life at that point. I was directing a show that my friend Stephen Banks wrote called Home Entertainment Center that we were doing for Disney. And then I was prepping Stephen King's Sometimes They Come Back as another feature that I was doing. And then these shows were happening. My father was dying and my daughter was about to be born. So it was a crazy time period in my life. And so, the shows on my hand wasn't, in it much beyond the creating of them and kind of sending the first couple scripts out and then putting people onto it. But, it's funny because those also those things that I thought would go away. But, there's a kind of a large fan base still for those, much to my, surprise. But, same thing. Sometimes they come back. When I did that for Dino De Laurentiis, I didn't think it was going to go beyond, that first film. So I didn't sign on to do sequels or any of that stuff. And it ended up spawning, I don't know, 2 or 3 sequels. So, my bad. I didn't realize that thing was going to work the way it worked. So,
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, my whole career has kind of been bouncing from, horror to thriller to romantic comedy to Christmas, to AIDS, to global warming, back to true crime, serial killers, wife beaters, alcoholism. I mean, so fantasy monsters and real monsters of society. And I find that those are kind of where the most drama takes place, as opposed to shows that are usually about police stations and courtrooms, where most of the drama, plays out.
Sure.
I went much more for the kind of the bigger monsters and try to people it with characters that you care about. So that's been sort of the direction of my career.
Very cool. Well, Tom, I have one last question for you, and I, since I reached out to you, I was like, oh man, what am I going to talk about with this guy without sounding like a complete doofus? And having seen interviews with you, and then just talking with you here, we know that you have a love for that old Universal Gothic horror, kind of era. So I came up with this question, and I hope it doesn't sound too stupid, but theoretically, in a fight between Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, and Dracula, as envisioned by Tom McLoughlin, who would win?
Boy, never been asked that question, I gotta say.
Really?
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah, out of all this year, it's like the Tarzan Superman question. Well, no questions. Superman would be, but
Yeah.
what maybe Tarzan was pretty strong. Well, let's see. I guess my vote would go for the Wolfman. I don't know, just because I see him as a scrappy fighter that would get in there and just keep going till he tore the throat and then, cut up the, pulled out the entrails and, the real, like John Landis's werewolf kind of,
Yeah.
Sure.
As opposed to just the Lon Chaney one, but still, so many of those kills you didn't really see. But I just feel like, that thing of biting and clawing as opposed to, taking the time to, bite a neck or, strangle you as Frankenstein would do. Mm-hmm. It just seems like that would be, I guess if I was, a kid going, what should make the most sense, that would definitely make, the most sense to me, I think. Certainly not the Mummy. Mummy wouldn't have a chance in hell.
It's too slow.
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of would, just, push the mummy over. You'd have a hard time getting back up, kind of deal. He always seems to kind of, start out upright and then go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Dracula could hypnotize you, but somehow I don't think Frankenstein could be hypnotized, nor the Wolfman when he's in the Wolfman mode. So,
Sure.
That I think that particular feature on him isn't going to help him much in just a straight out fight, a brawl. I think that's where the wolf would win.
Very cool. All right. Well, Tom McLoughlin, it was an honor, absolute honor speaking with you this evening, and I really appreciate having you on.
My pleasure.
All right. Have a great night, sir.
Okay. You guys take care, and thank you.
You too. Thank
you. Yep. You too. Thanks, Tom.
Good night.
All right, everybody. Well, I hope that you enjoyed the interview with Tom McLoughlin, again, writer and director of Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Libbs. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you like what you hear, please give us a subscribe and a like, and don't forget to turn on those notifications. Coming up on our next episode of the Horror Spot podcast, we are going to be covering the one, the only, A Nightmare on Elm Street, starring Robert Englund. It's going to be great. Hope you all tune in and listen. Again, I'm Blake.
And I'm Nick.
All right. Take it easy, everybody.